webinars from the Women's Business Development Center here in Chicago. Thank you all for joining us. This is me. I'm Karen Goldner, Director of the Small Business Development Center here at the WBDC. And before we get going, I'd like to kind of find out a little bit about each of you. So in a moment, we're going to have, okay, so sorry, not going to be able to do that. We're not going to have any poll questions today. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty on our end. So anyway, so let's go ahead and just get right started into things. What are we going to do today? We are going to talk about how you can leverage your personal network to grow your business, more efficiently use events as a way to grow your business, and maintain and business contacts. So I really think about networking in these three ways. So what does networking mean? Well, you can take the people you currently know and then see how you might be able to utilize that network, your personal network, to grow your business. Lots of networking events that are available, and often they can be, at least if you're like me, sort of painful unless you have a plan, and so we'll talk about how you can help develop a plan for yourself on those. And then once you've developed those contacts, how do you then maintain and develop more business contacts? There's a couple of housekeeping items I want to let you know about. In the handouts section, there are two documents that we'll talk about as we go along that you can download during the webinar, okay? But then there are also 3 additional ones that weren't able to managed to get loaded prior to when we had to launch. So you will each receive copies of these following the webinar, just within, I think, by this afternoon. That may make more sense to you as we go along if you haven't been in one of these GrowthWheel webinars before. And then the last thing I want to say is if you have any questions, please go ahead and use the question little box that's on your right-hand side of your screen. It should be in the GoToWebinar kind of panel, and just type in any question that you have whenever you have one. And if it's something I'm going to cover, I'll just answer it later. Or if it's another question, then I can answer it as we go. The show your hand feature doesn't work very well on the system, so just don't do that because I won't see it. But if you have a question, just feel free to shout out whenever you want. Okay. So here's the tools that you're going to be getting. Again, a couple of them you can download during the webinar, and you should. The handouts, the 2 handouts that are on the webinar panel. And the rest of the stuff you will be getting after the program. Okay, let's talk just briefly to review GrowthWheel. This is a program that we use here at the WBDC, and many SBDCs around the country use it. And it's based on helping business owners figure out how to focus and what to focus on, because there's lots of stuff you worry about all the time. All businesses have to have an attractive business concept. All businesses need to have a strong organization. You need to be able to operate profitably, and of course you need to have lasting customer relations. Each of these quartiles of the circle, or quarters of the circle, business concept, organization, operations, and customer relations, is divided then into a number of focus areas. We're obviously today going to be focused on this networking focus area. But I want you to see that there are all these areas where we have tools that can help you think through problems or challenges that you may be having in these areas. And on our website, which is new last week, newly launched, you can go into the events and our e-learning library and find archived webinars that we've done on all of these different topics, or most of these different topics at least. Okay, so what is networking? It is developing relationships. And as I said, it's kind of three approaches, right? So your current circle of contacts and growing from there. It is identifying specific targets. So I want to meet Jane Smith, who is the buyer at ABC Corporation. How do I find Jane Smith? As you all know, having a warm introduction is really either helpful or critical, sometimes one or the other, sometimes both, to be able to access people who otherwise don't know who you are, and why would they return your email. And then lastly, growing your contacts beyond the people that you already know. So that is that's a little bit more random, and we'll talk about that and how you can do it. And then, just to remind you, of course, you know this, but networking can be different in a business-to-consumer, B2C, or a business-to-business business. In other words, if you are operating a clothing store and you're selling direct to consumers, the networking you're going to do is going to be a little bit different than if you're in a business-to-business type of environment where you have really a smaller number of customers, a smaller market in terms of the number of prospects, but they may be more complex. In other words, if you're selling clothing to somebody, just direct to a consumer, you're talking about lots of individuals, whereas in a B2B world, obviously you're talking about, who's the decision maker within this company who would make the decision to buy my product. One thing I do want to kind of say at this point, because sometimes people feel like networking is very manipulative, and it really shouldn't be, I think. You want to make sure, though, you're not playing some sort of tit-for-tat type of game, like, I'll do this for you, what are you going to do for me? My own sort of experience and belief is that if you genuinely want to see how you can help others, your network becomes stronger for when you need it. So, if you can help somebody who can't help you, I think generally you should do that, because, all philosophy aside, in the end, it's likely to come back to benefit you. So think about the real world and the virtual world, right? We're not going to talk about social networking so much, other than LinkedIn, in the B2B space. But this webinar is going to focus more on, person-to-person discussions as opposed to how to, have a Facebook campaign. But do remember that that's super important. And again, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to just bounce them in. Okay, this is the first tool. And again, there's a couple tools that you can download, and you'll get the rest by email shortly, this afternoon. So this tool is kind of me-focused, or you, and it starts with who do you know. It's not target-focused. In other words, if your goal is to get to Jane Smith at Acme Corporation, this tool isn't designed to do that. This tool is designed to say, who do I know? My personal relations, my colleagues, my partners, my advisors, my suppliers, and remember your employees and your existing customers, and then who do they know who might be able to buy my product or service. So this is, in a way, a little random, but it is taking kind of your strongest relationships and building out. So the further away from me that this gets, the less strong the relationship is. But if you have, a sister who can introduce you to the purchasing director at ABC company, that might be something to pursue. So that's what this worksheet is kind of designed to help you sort of think through, okay, so I've got a good relationship with which supplier? Okay, you know, Jones contractor, whatever. So maybe, you know, I could ask Susie Jones to see who she might be able to introduce me to who would buy my product or service. And again, always remember employees and happy customers. I'm going to talk a little bit about partners and advisors, and there's a lot of more specific work, actually, even in GrowthWheel and some of the webinars that we've done about how to have successful relationships with partners and advisors. But one of the things that you often will get from a like an advisory board kind of person or a mentor will be access to that person's contacts. Okay. One of the key things to remember, I think, when you're dealing with any of this, and again, this gets to kind of how to not feel that you're manipulating or, you know, kind of trading on your friendships or anything like that, is you only want to talk with people in this kind of sense who you can help. So if you are, you know, you're not asking for you. If you're selling marketing services, for instance, you know, you don't want your friends to introduce you to people for purposes of this, you know, of your business who aren't going to benefit, who don't need marketing services. So, you know, you've got a great business and you want to be able to help more customers. So that's really what you're offering, is for your contacts to be able to strengthen their relationships with these people, right, whoever they are, by offering them a solution to their problem, and that solution would be you. The alternative way to look at this is that you need to then be able to provide these folks, the people you know, with a high degree of confidence that you are truly that solution, okay? It's sometimes the most important asset that a person has professionally is their reputation. So if somebody who I am unconfident in asks me to refer them, you know, to introduce them perhaps to a colleague, I'm going to maybe be a little uncomfortable with that, because I'm thinking, wow, you know, let's just say that I'm one of your colleagues, and I'm not comfortable with your business. I'm not comfortable with your ability to solve problems for your customers. And then you ask me, as a colleague or peer, to introduce you to people in my network who might be helpful for you. So the first thing is that you need to make sure that these folks, all of the people that you know, have a great deal of confidence in what you have to offer. Related to that is you want to make those introductions easy for people. Okay, so you want to have prepared your kind of personal, I'll use the word bio. It's really more of a statement of qualifications for your business. You know, short, easily to be copied and pasted into an email kind of thing. Just a paragraph talking about, it's your pitch, right? It's your elevator speech, but it is focused significantly on your experience. Now, if they already know your experience, then that is a little less important, but make it easy for people to be able to make those introductions, right? Don't make your supplier have to think about what they're going to say in an email to a company that they think might benefit from your services, right? Make it easy for them. Provide them with the language, for instance. And again, it's basically just your pitch with an emphasis on your qualifications. Okay, so here is another tool that is target focused. Okay, so this doesn't worry about who you already know. This is when you know who you want to meet. So you want to meet Jane Jones, who's the purchasing manager of, Acme Corporation, right? So you decide that she is someone who you want to influence to buy your product or service, or perhaps for some other reason that you need to meet her. And then you work backwards from her to figure out how you can find the person. So, and this can either be a specific person, Jane Smith at Acme Corporation, or it can be a type of person. And that type of person might be purchasing agents at companies of this, basically in your target market, right? So, companies that are between 50 and 200 million in revenue, that are in this industry, that buy these kinds of services, something like that. And so what this this chart helps you with identifying that kind of, or dividing it up by potential customers, decision makers, influencers, opinion leaders, experts, and others. So there, again, there may be multiple reasons why you want to talk to a particular person. Maybe you want to actually get on a panel of a national conference. So then you'd be looking maybe for somebody who knows someone who's in that decision-making capacity for the national conference, for instance. So this used to be a lot harder than it is now, thanks to the magic of LinkedIn, right? If you are not in LinkedIn, you need to be. So let's just talk about the basics, because there's whole workshops on, how to use LinkedIn effectively. And I will also say that LinkedIn itself changes every so often. And so something that maybe you thought worked or didn't work 2 years ago, you might revisit it, because they've done a number of things differently. But let's talk about, first of all, your profile. That's where it all starts. Make sure your profile is up to date, that it is customer focused. In other words, what are you providing for the customer? So you don't talk about you so much in your summary. You talk about what customers have said about you, or what you've been able to accomplish for customers. For instance, reduced costs by 10% and if you can say the name of the customer, great. If you can't, you can just say a Fortune 200 company, or was able to place high-level executives if you're a recruiting firm, whatever it is, but just that kind of very results-oriented. You want to try and get a few strong recommendations, not dozens, but maybe 1 or 2 for your current business, and if you're new in business, at least 1 or 2 for your sort of primary significant positions. And then a good picture. And, I'm sorry, no selfies, please. It's so obvious that that's what you've done, or that you've taken a picture with your laptop camera or something. I'm not saying go and get some kind of expensive professional photography, although if you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that. But just have a friend snap a picture so that at least it just looks respectable. It shouldn't be you at a party. It shouldn't be you with your family. This is a professional networking platform, and you should treat it as such. Okay, so then how to use it. So second-degree connections. You can actually go to third-degree connections with LinkedIn. I have found that to be personally useless. So if somebody has been able to figure out how to use third-degree connections, please type something in the questions bar so that we can share it with the class, as they say. But second-degree connections are people who are 2 degrees from you. So I know Susie, and Susie knows Jane Smith, right? So then Jane Smith would be a second-degree connection. So I find the target, Jane Smith, and then I can see by using LinkedIn who in my network knows that person, right? And that's a relatively straightforward way to use LinkedIn. What I have also found, though, is even when I'm contacting the person in my network, not everybody uses LinkedIn regularly or pays attention to their emails from LinkedIn. So I would recommend that you just reach out to the individual, in this case Susie for me. I either call her or just send her a regular email to her regular email account rather than going through the LinkedIn process, which sometimes can be just missed. Another thing that you can do with LinkedIn is search in the My Network and Interests section to find people with whom you have some kind of common connection, even if it's not someone you know. So, you know, maybe somebody who went to your college or school, maybe you both worked together at a company. Even if you didn't know each other, you might reach out and say, hey, I worked at Abbott Labs. I noticed that you worked at Abbott Labs. I've got this business now, and I'm trying to reach out to somebody, and that you appear to know them. This is, you know, looser, right? It's a much looser connection that you have with them. And so it may be that you're asking a lot. In other words, you're asking that person to stake their reputation, right, as we talked about, of introducing you to this person in their network. But sometimes it can work. So it's certainly a good way to develop additional relationships. Certainly if you say to somebody, hey, you know, we both used to work at Abbott Labs, and, you know, I see that you're kind of working in the same field as me now, or maybe you, you know, we're both working downtown or whatever. Would you like to get together for coffee? You know, that's probably a better way to start that. But again, if you have a little tighter relationship, like maybe you both perhaps worked with a third person who kind of then becomes your reputation enhancer. Yeah, you know, we both used to work for Joe, and you know, so I understand that you might know, you know, Jane Jones, I've forgotten what name I made her up, at Acme, but then you're kind of pulling your relationship back through your former boss. So just a thing to, but it's a good way to grow your network just in general. Okay, so here's some more tips. One is called Look and Look Back. So you can see on LinkedIn, even in a free version, the last 5 people who have looked at you, have, you know, been looking at your profile. So if you see that, look back at them, right? And if it seems like somebody who's interesting, you might just reach out to them. And at this point, reach out through LinkedIn and just send them a message and say, hey, you know, I noticed that you saw my profile. Definitely you look like somebody that I would, you know, like to meet to talk a little bit more about, and then make a topic, and see what happens. So, you know, that doesn't take very long, and it's, you know, potentially a good way to make some contacts. You can use LinkedIn for research. So not just individuals, but companies often have LinkedIn profiles, and you can follow the companies and then see what kinds of changes are happening. And this is especially true for small professional services companies. If you note that a large company is looking for maybe a marketing manager, right? So they clearly have an opening in that area. Well, if you're a marketing company, it might be a great time to reach out and say, you know, hey, we provide outsourced marketing solutions, and you know, that you might be interested. You can see when companies acquire and divest of I mean, that would be true for larger companies. You can see companies that have, for instance, a lot of hiring going on. If you sell office furniture, you know, maybe a company that's growing that fast might need more office furniture. So you can just kind of see what is going on with these companies from afar, and then decide if they make good sense as targets. You can also, and this is especially true in B2B, read profiles of managers in those companies to find out what they actually do. Job titles can be helpful, but not always, right? If you're selling into a very large company, they're going to have a lot of purchasing managers. They're going to have the people who buy, sort of core product. They're going to have the people who buy services. They're going to have the people who specialize in legal services, all of those things. And if you can find out, maybe it's not Jane Smith at all that you need to talk to. Maybe it's, Bob Jones, that he's actually the guy who makes the decision about buying whatever it is you're selling. And then last but not least, use groups. They are really a good source of information for industry-wide types of information, as well as group, specifically about target companies. The other thing about groups is that if somebody on LinkedIn is doing a search, and you and they are in the same group, you are more likely to match with them. So you can do up to 50 groups in LinkedIn, and you really should. Now you want to go in through and change the settings so that you don't get an email every time somebody posts something on it, because that's just psychotic. But you might as well use those group opportunities, because again, it can help you. So if and this is obviously true in job search, but it's also true if a purchasing person is using LinkedIn as a way to identify prospective, especially in professional services. And if you happen to be in the same group, I mean, you're not going to know each other. These groups have 50,000 people in them, but at least LinkedIn might give you a little bit better score. So I'm going to put up the link here of the blog that I found to be very helpful and actually got some of these tips from. So I'm going to leave it up for just a moment so you can jot it down if you want. It's from the Salesforce British blog, whatever. That was kind of random. I just found it by Googling use LinkedIn for sales or use LinkedIn for recruiting. So I'll give you another little bit to jot that down before we go on to our next tool. And again, if you have questions, just feel free. And if you haven't yet downloaded the 2 handouts that are already loaded, you want to just do that at some point as well. Okay, moving on. So here's another one of our tools, and this is useful for creating opportunities when you want to expand beyond your own knowledge. In other words, we've already talked about how to expand using your own network, and then there's specific targets you can identify, but that's still within your own knowledge. So how can you grow it more generally? And there's all of these different kind of possibilities, and some of them make sense for you and some of them don't, just depending. NGO means non-governmental organization, so essentially nonprofits. Professional networks, there's online forums and online network resources as well. But let's just think about how you might do this. So let's think about you're a marketing company and you sell into, Fortune 500 companies in the Chicagoland area. So you might do some research as to what are the professional networking groups where your target market hangs out, right? So that would be one list. You could do that. Another might be, let's say that everybody in your industry goes to a particular trade show, in Vegas every year. So you're going to go. But you want to think about how expensive is that, and then what are we going to be able to get from these connections? A lot of people, specifically with trade shows, go without any particular agenda. And actually that's even true with sort of smaller, networking events after work kind of thing. But at least the expense of those is less, right? I mean, you pay $20 and it takes a couple hours of your time to go to a networking event after work, as opposed to a large trade show. And even if you're not exhibiting, it's going to be a very expensive proposition. So you really want to think through, what are we going to get? So let's talk about that a bit. Okay, you want to make the most of them. First of all, you want to have a goal for the event. You shouldn't go to a networking event unless there's a goal. And that goal really shouldn't be, I'm going to make a sale, because it's super unlikely you're going to make a sale the first time you meet somebody. So what kind of goals could you have? Well, you might say, I want, to make 10 contacts. Or I'm pretty sure that somebody from ABC company is going to be there, and I want to reach out to them. I want to meet someone from that company. Or maybe there's people, maybe it's not that specific, but it's particular industries. I really want to get into selling into the automotive market, and I'm going to this event in Detroit where there's going to be a lot of automotive people, so that's the reason I'm going to this event. Okay. Now I would say that the more general you are, well, let me put it this way, the more specific you are, the better. So if you can get in advance a list of people who are going to be there, that is super valuable. And you don't just take the list, then you go back to LinkedIn and you research that list. And you might then, using that information, say, okay, I really want to talk to Jim Johnson, because he looks like somebody I really want to reach out to. I'm going to track him down at this event and just kind of bump into him. Isn't that coincidental? But you've done it with that thought. So then one of your goals for this event is to meet Jim Johnson. Okay, now you're there, and there are people who love these sorts of events, and there are people who aren't in love with them, and I will put myself in the latter category. But there's things that you can do to get beyond that. Okay, so for instance, focus on other people by asking questions. You can ask personal questions, and I don't mean deeply personal questions, but like if you were, what are you doing this weekend? Or do you have big weekend plans? Or how about those Bears? Or something like that. And then professional. You want to get to their business needs. That may not be where you start, but you find out what they do, and then, oh, do you buy marketing? How do you do your marketing? Just find out more about them. This is a good way to do industry research, for instance, or even company research, to find out more about the individual kind of at a granular level. Business cards, business cards, business cards. So you always want to ask for one. And take notes on it, because you're not going to remember afterwards. If you come back with 10 or 15 business cards, you're probably not going to remember who was doing what. So take a couple of notes on the back of their card, and then make sure you follow up. Make sure you follow up. Again, it's important not to view networking as an immediate exchange, right? So this isn't, I'm going to meet you and you're going to do something for me right away. Or I'm going to meet you and you want me to introduce you to somebody, so I'll do that, and then you'll introduce me to somebody else. This is about relationship development. A little trick about business cards, actually, a guy that I used to work with said that he actually never carried cards. So that way he could say, oh, man, I don't have a card. Can I just get one of yours and then follow up with you? That's really what you want, because you don't, I mean, they can have your card and not do anything with it. If you have their card, you're in control of what happens with that information. So anyway, that he saved a little bit of money on business cards, but the point is to be able to always try and make sure you get one of theirs. And sometimes it's easier to get one of theirs if you don't have one of yours, if that makes any sense. Okay, so here's a few more in-person tips. And Michelle Merritt is a former colleague of mine in Indiana who has a really nice blog that I'm highlighting right down here. So you might go to that at some point and get some more kind of, I mean, she just has a lot of good stuff. The first thing is, have a good handshake. Just don't give somebody a cold fish thing, because that's just gross. So you don't have to break their hand. You really shouldn't break their hand, but you also want to make sure that you're not just being limp. Okay, give a compliment. So compliments, you know, not anything personal and nothing about appearance, other than I think that generally women can get away with something like, oh, what cute shoes, or, you know, I love that dress, whatever. I wouldn't suggest men do that for women, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest women do it for men. But anyway, that's kind of as personal as I think you should go. But it's much better to have something more substantive, like, wow, that was a great question that you asked during the panel that we all just sat through, right? Or you're with company X, I've been so impressed with their customer service. You know, that tends to be a better kind of icebreaker. So then questions, ask questions. We've talked about this, but let's talk about it a little bit more. So why and how questions, so not just yes and no questions, can keep a conversation going. And then you also want to share something so that it doesn't feel like an interrogation. So, you know, you don't have to spend it, and you shouldn't spend an enormous amount of time talking about yourself. But if you're the one always asking the questions and you never share anything back, it just starts to feel a little weird for the person. So, you know, you say, you know, I was really, you know, that was a great question that you asked during that program. Are you, you know, involved, I mean, in the industry? Because obviously you know a lot about it based on the question. And then the person, you know, can talk about how they're involved with the industry. And then you can say something like, you know, well, I've got, you know, I've been doing this for about 20 years, but I just started my own business a couple of years ago. And then you can ask them a question again. So again, you're providing some information as well as just asking. So one of the things that actually Michelle says in her blog is start with hello. You know, it doesn't have to be anything super complicated. You want to, you know, smile at the person, right? So, you know, that's important. And then you can also talk about things like, have you attended this conference before? But, you know, this doesn't have to be brilliant. So the classics of what do you do? You know, where are you from? Those are, you know, perfectly good questions to get the conversation going. Watch your body language. So don't stand with your hands folded over your chest. That's very closed. So you want to keep kind of an open posture facing the person. And put away the phone. So there's been some sort of study that I think Michelle talked about that when people are, you know, studied, if there was a conversation that occurred and the cell phone wasn't visible, people viewed it as a more significant conversation than if that same conversation occurred and the person had their cell phone out. It just means you're focused on that person, and people like to be focused on. And then you want to keep it short, right? So if the person starts asking you questions, give them your 30-second pitch. Don't give them the story of your life. And then after a little while, let them move on to another person, because you're there to meet people, right? Not to spend all of your time dominated by one person. And I think many of us have probably had the experience where somebody kind of gets a hold of you and then you just can't break away. And all of a sudden you see your prospect heading out the door because this other person just didn't understand that they were being super rude. So don't be that person. Okay. Let's look at, oh, I'm supposed to actually, sorry. Back on this, there's a few other things that I wanted to mention, actually. So make sure you're listening. That's important. Frame your next question in relation to what the person just said. So that's, in a way, that's just being polite, but it's helping you develop a relationship. So here are a few don'ts, okay? And this is actually all from Michelle. So don't talk about your favorite topic. because you can end up just talking too much and then everybody else feels left out. Don't talk again for more than 30 seconds without giving the other person a chance to speak. People just sort of fade away from that point. You'll see the eyes glaze over kind of thing. And again, then don't stay too long. So you can just exit gracefully, and if the other person won't let go of you, then you might just say, hey, you know, wow, I'm really thirsty. I need to get another beverage, or boy, that food looks great and I haven't eaten. I'm going to sneak away and go up to the food table. You know, ask for their card, suggest maybe you speak more in the future, but then just move on. Okay, good. Now, the next tool. So speaking of following up, right, this is a tool that can help you do that. You're going to write down the person's name, who they are, and then you're going to decide how often you're going to make contact with them. Because meeting somebody once, you know, if you never follow up, or if you follow up once and then let the contact go stale, you know, you've really wasted that opportunity. Now, I don't mean that you need to have coffee with this person every month, but it's helpful to send kind of no strings attached kind of information. And, you know, sending them articles, for instance, that they actually may find truly valuable. You know, not about you, not about your company. You can do that occasionally, but maybe some kind of interesting industry article that you read. I would recommend that you stay away from cute cats unless you have determined in your conversation that the person just loves cats. But stuff that you see come across your desk, maybe there's an event invitation that you get to some sort of, you know, another kind of networking or maybe an educational program that you think that this person might genuinely be interested in. And you just, you know, forward the email and say, hey, thought you might be interested in this. It keeps you kind of in their circle of thinking. And then when you come back to say, hey, you know, now I really want to sell you something, you've developed that relationship. So those are the tools. And again, please go ahead and download the ones on the handouts, but then you'll be receiving an email from Eleni Gurma here at the WBDC later today that will have the rest of the handouts. Okay, so what are you going to do next? You can work through them on your own. You can make an appointment to see myself or Meg Herman, who is our Director of Entrepreneurial Services here at the WBDC, if you're in the Chicago area. And we're both certified in GrowthWheel. And if you live outside of Chicago, you can go to sba.gov and just type in your state or even your zip code, and you will be able to get an SBDC near you. And as I said, many SBDCs across the country, not all of them, but many of them use GrowthWheel. But certainly in every state in the country, there is an SBDC network. Okay, so you can work through either these tools or others that can help you break through, as we say, to your next level of planning. You can get some information on the GrowthWheel.com website to get a sense of what kinds of things are available. And you can also go to our website, wbdc.org, to check out upcoming webinars and other events. We are having one later this month on social media. So the appointments for advising are always provided at no charge, and this is true no matter what SBDC you go to. We can meet in person or by the phone. There's an intake form we would need to have you complete, and usually it's, you know, 45 minutes to an hour type of thing for the appointment. If you're in Illinois, you can call us, and this is our scheduling desk at extension 100, and you can either meet with myself or Meg. And again, that can either be in person or by phone. So, are there any questions that anybody has? Or does anybody want to share a networking tip that I didn't talk about, but that they found helpful for them? Well, we do have a question, which is how to find out about networking events. And I would say that you want to just get on email lists. And, you know, depending, again, on who your target market is. So if you're selling in, let's say your target market are certain kinds of small businesses in Chicago, then it may be that kind of local chambers of commerce might be potentially good, or local trade associations. If you're selling to, you know, manufacturers, for instance, there's local trade associations of manufacturers, or in particular industries, maybe in the financial industry or whatever. If you're selling on more of a sort of national scope, or at least Midwest regional scope in the B2B space, you might look at more national or regional conferences. So, you know, it always comes back down to the target market question. But you can often find events online, and then once you go to something, you can get on their lists. But and check with some of your friends or colleagues, and you know, see what they have found helpful. If you are in the B2B space and looking to sell to large corporations, major corporations, and if you are a 51% or more woman-owned, operated, and controlled business, it probably is valuable to consider getting a WBE certification. That stands for Women's Business Enterprise. And we have events with our procurement corporate partners that are focused on procurement, and that can be a really valuable networking opportunity for you. But again, that's really tends to be focused on the corporate space. So if that's not your target market, then never mind. Are there any other questions? Well, again, thank you for joining us. I will remind you that we have a social media webinar coming up later this month. You can check out all of our events at www.wbdc.org and in the events panel. And if you haven't looked at our website in the last week, it's new and improved, so hopefully you can find things more easily. And please take a moment, if you haven't, to download the 2 handouts that are up on the GoToWebinar panel. And the rest of them will be emailed to you later this afternoon. So thank you very much. I hope, looking at the list of names, I know some of you. Others I hope to meet here at the WBDC. Thank you all so much, and have a good afternoon. I'm going to keep it open just for another moment or two to let you finish downloading. Thank you. Bye-bye.